All right, so I'm going to get started here in respect of everyone's time that was on here on time. So I just like to start by introducing myself. My name is Joseph Timbo. I'm the Director of Business Development here at Beringer Technology Group. Behringer Technology Group is an IT service provider as well as an application development partner. We have two different divisions of the organization. Today, we are actually featuring our CTO, Rob Hess. He will be going through one of the many things that we were able to help with on that application development division. And with that, Rob, I'd like to hand it over to you so that you can do your thing.
Cool. Appreciate it, Joe. Just want to make sure that you can see my screen, you can hear me okay. All that sounds good?
Sounds good.
All right. So appreciate the introduction. Once again, Beringer Technology Group, we've been in business almost 30 years now. And we do specialize in solving problems using a lot of the Microsoft technologies like Copilot, Power Platform, Dynamics, and Azure Integration Services. I've been with Behringer for just about 20 years, which is a lifetime in IT. But my history with the Microsoft platform starts back with Microsoft CRM version 1.2. I think that was about 15 years ago I started playing with it, so I kind of watched the evolution as it went from CRM to XRM as they migrated to the cloud, and then they introduced the Power Platform. So I know that there's a lot of webinars out there that focus exclusively on Copilot agents, but I wanted to take a different approach and show you how we can use Copilot behind the scenes and leverage the power of AI, specifically in Power Automate. So I'm going to walk you through some demos here where we can actually translate and provide intelligent recommendations by using AI. I'm a lifelong developer, and my passion is with moving and transforming data. In fact, the first time I did it, I was about 7 years old, I think, using my Radio Shack TRS-80 color computer, connecting to another computer using a 300 baud modem. First time I was able to send a message across that telephone wire, I was hooked. So recently, I've been very interested in injecting AI solutions into my data integrations to help me solve issues. Historically, I solve issues with heavy code, but my goal here is to find ways to hand those tasks off to AI so I can go off and focus on other projects. So we're going to walk through some quick PowerPoint here, but I really prefer to jump in and kind of give you a tour so that way we can build something together to see how it works. If you have any questions, feel free to put those questions in the chat, and I'm sure we'll find some time at the end to review those questions and hopefully give you some good answers here. All right, so I'm going to switch back to my screen here. Just want to make sure everybody can see it. Once again, Beringer Technology Group, streamlining data automation with Copilot and Power Automate AI Prompts. We have all the different ways that you can contact us up at the top. But let's move on here. All right, so welcome to AI Prompts. Does anybody know who that is? My little AI buddy? Go ahead and post it in the chat if you do. If you do, you might need to refill your authentication, but he's going to be helping me out today. So what are AI prompts? So AI prompts are natural language instructions given to AI models to generate specific responses. So these prompts work just like their Copilot agent counterparts. You provided some instructions along with some data to derive an anticipated response. So Power Automate actually allows you to integrate these AI prompts using the AI Builder feature, and it leverages the ChatGPT models powered by Azure OpenAI services. So how can I use these AI prompts in a Power Automate flow? Well, you can add a prompt in as an action in a flow to generate text after defining the prompts. You can then use that generated text in your flow's actions. You can actually even add in review steps. So a human can actually look at the quality and compliance of the AI-generated content before you actually send it out or do something with it. So we're going to test both of those out today. All right, so what are some of the practical uses of AI prompts? Well, I mean, in general, you can use it to automate content processing, like summarizing documents, classifying emails, generating reports. I'm sure everyone here has played with Copilot or some sort of AI agent. So essentially, you can do a lot of the same things, but just in an automated manner. But I can give you some more specific examples in that. So typically, I think back to a lot of the tasks that required a lot of heavy code, and I try to find easier ways to do it. So for example, I can use AI prompts to help with automated email routing. So think about how your emails come into your team today, perhaps to your service desk. They probably just go to a generalized mailbox, and then people kind of sort through it to find out who needs to answer it. Well, I can use AI prompts to take a look at the emails, and perhaps I can route it or prioritize it based on some sort of sentiment analysis or keywords in that email. How about support ticket enhancements? So I can use these AI prompts to look at the content of the email, and then I can leverage my knowledge base, all of my closed service tickets, all of my time entries, and essentially generate next steps for a tier 1 resource. So instead of that email creating a case with no specific direction, I'm actually going to give that tier 1 resource very specific steps to follow based on a lot of the knowledge that we've used to solve something similar in the past. Phone number normalization is a big one. How often have you tried to normalize phone numbers when it has weird special characters in it, extensions, there's foreign numbers? Copilot's really good at taking a look at those and kind of giving you a structured way to pull phone numbers. It actually works the same with geocoding. So I can send in a zip code and it can determine what city and state and what country it belongs to. It does a really good job with that. How about data extraction? So I want to extract some key values from an email and create a structured data set so I can have one of my applications ingest it. So that's a really big one that we've used in the past, where we've had to write heavy code for it. In fact, I think we can go through that one today. That's going to be a really good use case. And the other use case is going to be inventory management. How about a process where we can consume our inventory, determine what's low, determine a potential replacement, and then proactively communicate it with my team before they try to sell it? I think that sounds like another great use case for us to review today. All right. Do you guys have any good ideas? I'm curious to know some of the challenges that you're running into. I'd love to hear them. So go ahead and list them in the chat, and we'll take a look at those as well. All right, so we're almost done with the PowerPoint, I promise. I'd actually like to go through and play with some AI prompts. So let's log in and see what fun templates are there. Let's see some of the controls that I can adjust. So I'm going to share out another screen here. And I'm going to assume that everyone can now see my Power Automate screen. So if you've worked in the Power Platform, this screen should look very familiar here, where we can build out solutions, we can build out Power Automate flows, but we can also build out our AI prompts. And that's where I want to start here. I'm going to drop down to AI prompts here on the left-hand side. There's a few different ways you can get to it, but this is going to be our starting point for today. And once again, just like a Copilot chat, you can do many, many different things simply by just giving it some information and some instructions. You can build your own from the ground up, or you can actually use some of the templates that Microsoft provides. So if you think about it from the concept of some information is coming in and you want to do something with it, I think a lot of these different examples here make sense. So if we take a look at these templates, here's a good one, summarize text. I think everyone's used Copilot to do that in the past, where you can take a very large body of text and summarize it in just a couple of different sentences. Here's one called extract information from text. That's one that we're going to use here today. Sentiment analysis of text. So if somebody sends in an email, you can actually understand their emotions and then make a decision based on that. Here's a pretty cool one. Measure the similarity or the dissimilarity between two texts. So this one's pretty interesting. What if you have a support rep going back and forth with a client and they can't seem to resolve a case? Perhaps you can use this to essentially look at their conversation and find the topics that they disagree on and help summarize that to help them provide a path forward. There's a pretty cool one here, respond to a complaint. So this is a pretty good one to provide some sort of homogeneous way for your support team to essentially re-engage a client and help them really give a head start on an email if there's an issue with the client. There's lots here. Here's one that I love here, review legal documents. I mean, who likes to review legal documents? But this is a pretty cool one because you can essentially identify and summarize some of the key obligations and liabilities in a contract. Once again, there's plenty of things here. You can actually plug them into your Power Automate flows and help with your automation. Anyway, so we're going to use a couple of these in today's demo. So let's switch back to my PowerPoint and let's talk about the first use case of the day. So the first case is inventory management. So I'm in charge of managing inventory for Nova Robotics. Did anybody else grow up in the 80s? Did you all appreciate this movie? So my sales team complains that when they sell a hot item, the customer gets frustrated because they don't know that it's out of stock until they've created the order. It's a very rare scenario. So my job is to look at the inventory report every morning and communicate out of stock inventory, as well as suitable replacements before the team starts their day. All right, so the question is, can I automate that with Copilot and with an AI prompt? I hope the answer is yes. That's why you're all here. So I'm going to go back here to my AI hub. And I want to create a new prompt. And I'm going to build my own custom prompt, and I'm just going to simply say, please analyze and summarize this inventory data. So since I'm not the best typer, I'm going to do a lot of copy and pasting here. And then I'm going to add an input here for some text. All right, now I need to provide it some sort of sample data. So this is actually a great way that I can test this prompt out to make sure that it's working the way that I would like. The question is, how do I actually generate some sample data? Well, since I have Copilot, I'm going to have Copilot do all that heavy lifting for me. And by the way, if you're building out some sort of demo for a client, this is a great way or a great use case for Copilot here. You can essentially have Copilot generate all the sample data that you need for your demo. So I'm going to say something very basic like, can you generate me some sample data? Keeping in mind that my entire chat is context sensitive, so I'm going to sort of like work through a process of asking it question after question until I get just what I want. Right, there's some very random sample data. That doesn't help me much. So how about this? I'm interested in a very specific data set. Perhaps I'm doing a presentation for Lego. So I want some sample inventory from their website. So I type it in, it's going to go through their website and pull me out a bunch of different items. All right, that's not enough. I want 20. So I'm going to ask it to please give me 20 items. It's looking good. How about this? Can you add column for inventory? And now it's starting to build out a data set that I like. How about this? Can you add a column for ID and replacement ID? And as I walk through this process with Copilot, essentially it's going to build me out just the data set that I want here. So there's some IDs, there's some replacement IDs. In this case, I also want to be able to simulate some products that are out of stock. So I'm going to ask it one more question, and then we'll go back to our demo here. How about this? Can you change 2 items to have a quantity of 0? And you can see Copilot is more than happy to help me. All right, so now that I have a sample data set, I'm going to switch back over to my custom prompt. I'm going to paste in my data set as an input. And now I can actually test out my prompt. So I'm going to click on this test prompt button, and let's see what it does. So I just gave it a raw data set that I generated from Copilot based on the Lego website, and it's kind of given me some high-level look at my stock. So 20 items, total quantity available. There's the value of the inventory. It already noticed that there's a couple things that are out of stock, as well as some of the highest and lowest priced items. So without giving a lot of instruction, it kind of gave me this really high-level look at my inventory, which is pretty cool. We're going to define this prompt just a little bit more, but I wanted to walk you through some of the options here. So when you're building your prompt, you have a lot of control. Right now I have my sample data as my input, but you can add as many variables as you want here. So if I have to bring in data from many different sources, I can add them in as inputs. If you happen to be using the Dataverse, you can natively integrate your data from the Dataverse right here by adding knowledge. You have different ways to output data. So we're using text for this use case. We're going to use JSON, which is a much more structured way in the next use case. And then finally, we can actually choose some different things like models and temperature. So right now we're using the GPT-4o Mini. That's the default. So that's really nice for simple text and tasks that need quick responses. There's an advanced one. So this can actually really dive into documents and images and pull things out of it. And then they have their advanced reasoning, which is really deep thinking. So many different models you can play with. Of course, there are different prices depending on which one you use. And then you can also control the temperature here. So a lower temperature is something that's more predictable and conservative. And then if I want to raise it all the way to 1, I can essentially have it be much more creative. So that's helpful if I'm generating new content. But in this case, since I want higher accuracy and less variability, I'm going to leave it at 0. All this stuff is documented, but I just want to show you here that there are some options that we can play with here. All right, so I have a nice high-level look at my inventory, but I'm not really concerned about that. I'm looking for things that have low inventory. So I'm going to update my prompt a little bit more. Let's give it some instructions here. So this summary should focus on the products that have low inventory, and then make recommendations on potential replacements for any items that have 0 in stock. I also talk about the item's ID field, so it knows exactly in my data set what I consider to be the item ID, as well as the replacement ID. So I'm going to be very specific about that so it's not guessing. And then I want to format the response as non-technical, suitable for a general audience. Let's test that out and see if we get a different response. There we go. So a nice high-level summary as well as the low inventory. So here's my quantities that are 0, as well as a recommended replacement. So I can see that my Millennium Falcon is out of stock, as well as my Frozen Ice Castle is also out of stock. And then it also showed some other ones that have sort of a lower quantity. All right, so this actually saved me a lot of time because now I don't actually have to go and look in my application, look at my database, look at a Power BI report or anything. I can have this AI prompt do it just for me. One more thing, it's kind of bland, so you can add a little bit of personality here. I also want to say that my sales team needs to be inspired. You know how sales guys get. So create a very inspiring response with plenty of magical emojis. All right, it's kind of cheesy, but I do want to show that you do have control over the actual content that comes out of Copilot. So there it is. Happy emojis. We're going to take a magical journey through our inventory. My point here is that you can craft it any way that you want. So I like this. It looks pretty good so far. So I'm going to go ahead and save it. So I'm going to save that as my use case number 1. There it is. So now that I have my prompt safe here, I'm going to go up to Power Automate, and I'm going to build a flow. So looking at the time, it's 3:55. I'm going to walk through this at a higher level just to show you how all the pieces connect together. And then I'm actually going to jump into one that I built that has all of the different features and functionalities that I want just to show you how it works. But at a high level, if you've never built out a flow, you can essentially determine what triggers the flow. So you can trigger it manually, which we're going to do here today for our demo, but we can also have it triggered based on a certain time of day. So in this use case, if my sales team starts at 8 a.m., perhaps I want this to run at 7:55 a.m. So that way, when they log in, Copilot will send them a message as soon as they log in. I could also set it so it happens when something actually goes out of stock, so it can be more of a real-time interaction. So if something is out of stock, it'll let my team know immediately. Once again, that trigger's up to you, but I'm just going to trigger it manually just for the sake of this demo. All right, so there's my trigger. And I'm going to start adding some actions here. So let's start with my Dataverse. And I'm interested in this one called List Rows. So natively, this is integrated with my Dataverse, and I'm looking at my dev environment. So it should natively know how to find all the different tables in my dev environment. So if I search for products, there it is. Best practice is that I would actually limit the columns that I want, as well as maybe filter some rows. I'm not going to do all that, but I do want to point out that there are some best practices with querying data. So that's going to find all of my products. All right, let's keep going here. So after that, let's add another action. And now we want to find my prompt by using AI Builder. And we have this one here that's called Create Text with GPT using a Prompt. So when I click on that, and I click on my drop-down, there's our use case that we created. It's now available for me to use. And if you notice here, there's an input called inventory. And that exists because I created that inventory when I made my prompt. So instead of sending it sample data, I can actually click on this function, and I can actually pull in the list of products from my previous step. So I'm going to pass all of that into my prompt. So far, so good. Let's keep going here. I can also add in this approval step, and I can click on Start and wait for an approval. And when I do that, I have some different options here. So this is a great way for you to actually review the text that's generated from your prompt. And it gives you the ability, or perhaps a bunch of people, the ability to approve it before it actually gets sent out for a team. So if you trust Copilot, maybe you don't have to use this, but I think this is a great way for you to get comfortable with the technologies to make sure that you're getting the response that you want. So there's my approve reject. And then finally, I'm going to add one more step here. And this is going to be a step to send a message out to Microsoft Teams. And I'm going to post a message here in my chat. So let's see if I can find that. There's my chats. Post a message in a chat or a channel. And here I have some different options. I can actually post it specifically to just a single person in a chat. I can post it to a group chat, or I can actually post it to a channel. So for example, if I clicked on channels, it would take a look at all the different teams that I have inside of my tenant, as well as all the different channels inside. In this case, I'm just going to send it to myself. And I can type in my name, and hopefully it'll find me. Let's see, all right. Should find me. There we are. And then finally, I can take the response from my prompt. There's my response, and add it there as an output. So that's in a nutshell. I kind of went through it pretty quick, so I missed a lot of the little nuances. But I do have another one built up that looks just like it. So let's jump over to that one. Kind of looks a little bit different. I did add a condition here. So essentially, I want to make sure that if somebody does approve it, and it is true, it's going to post that message. If not, I can perhaps create some sort of loop here that essentially can regenerate a different response. So instead of me coming in here and trying to adjust the flow, I can control this from Teams, and I can either approve or reject it. You can actually set up an approval where you actually give it more information and more instructions that you can send back to your chat. So you can build out some really cool stuff here if you wanted to. But anyway, let's try it out and let's see how it works. So I'm going to go ahead and click on run. Once again, this is a manually triggered. I can have it triggered based on time of day. I can have it triggered based on perhaps when one of my inventory gets low or goes out of stock. But I'm going to run that. Let's see what happens here. All right, so I can see that my flow is running. And it runs rather quick, but at some point it's actually going to pop up an approval process inside of Microsoft Teams. So I'm going to let it generate that text and pop it up, and then I'm going to show you what that looks like. Oh, there's my approval. Okay, so I got a little pop-up here. I'm just going to drag my screen over here. So this is my live Teams. And essentially what it's telling me here is that here's the text I'm sending it. There's my inventory message, so I can review it. And I can either reject it or I can approve it. Once again, I can build out something here a little bit more sustainable where I can actually add comments and reject it, and those comments can actually go back to my chat and then give it more instructions to generate something different. It's a very basic use case, so I'm just going to go ahead and approve it. And then once I approve it, I'm going to get a message here. And I'm going to show you what that looks like in my Teams chat. So there it is. So this is a live message from my AI chat that essentially now has told me here that there are products that have zero quantity as well as replacements here. And of course, I have all of my happy little emojis. So once again, this is something that I can automate to keep my sales team up to date as far as what they can or can't or should sell. and I don't have to do anything. I've created the flow, and now I can go off and do other things while my AI takes over. Right. How was that? Pretty cool? Was it useful?
I think that's really cool, Rob. So can you go back? Can you do one thing? Can you go back to that flow real quick?
Sure.
So there, I think that's a really good visual right there to say at the very high level, you can trigger this off of manually or automated things.
Mm-hmm.
Then the next step is you're querying a completely different database for a knowledge resource for this flow and that AI. And then you're creating the prompt to trigger the AI to do something with that data. And you're then telling it what to do with that data. And then there in that last little prompt where it says start and wait for an approval text, like that's a conditional setting. Then you're not really letting AI go off the rails with a process to automate, which this process is a fairly important process, making sure that your sales team is selling the right stuff at the right time. And then creating a feedback loop so that that process then improves. I think that is super interesting, and that's just one of your use cases. So I'm interested to see what the next one is.
Cool. Yeah, I appreciate it. And this is querying my Dataverse. So this is the Power Platform Cloud Database. And once again, it could be really any data source. Microsoft has hundreds of connectors. So perhaps I'm pulling data from Salesforce or Oracle or, geez, even an Excel sheet. All that's very legal here to use these ChatGPT prompts to extract data. So many different options here. All right, let's go back to my PowerPoint. Promised you we don't have a lot of PowerPoints, so I only have one more slide here. So this is my second use case, data normalization. So here it is. I am in charge of managing the welcome@Nova Robotics email account. So I receive all sorts of data from humans and robots, and it's my job to dig through it and make sense of it all. So I probably get 500 emails a day, and it's no fun digging through junk. Really, my job here is to dig through it and load only the good data into my Dataverse as a lead so my outreach team can engage with their Dynamics applications. All right, so can I automate that with Copilot and an AI prompt? Yeah, you bet we can. So this is a pretty interesting one because I've programmed many of these in the past, and there's a couple different ways to do it. And typically, if you have a developer on staff, you would talk with perhaps whomever is sending you the information. You'd have to talk about APIs and authentication and ways to sort of, agree on what a schema looks like. And there's a lot of technical pieces behind it. I won't lie, it's fun, but I'm kind of into that. But if you don't have a developer on staff and you have somebody just sending you emails, you can also accomplish the task. I will say, in general, even if you're trying to parse emails with code, it gets really messy because you're looking for some sort of fixed format or keyword format. And I will say processes like that break a lot because formats of emails change. But with using Copilot and AI prompts, I've seen it handle it really, really well. So let's walk through that use case and see what that looks like. So let me save that one. Oh, yep, I know. And let's go back to my AI prompts. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and use one of the templates that Microsoft provides. So there's one here called Extract Information from Text. And this is pretty cool because just at a high level, they're looking to take data from some sort of variable. They're looking to use some sort of control list to say what fields they want to pull from. And then they're giving a lot more information as far as like, let's flatten the hierarchy. Let's look at different data types. And then they're even giving some sort of example of what that should look like. So they're looking to have a very specific JSON format. And that JSON is important because in the end, regardless of whether you want to look at that JSON data or not, we can actually use it in one of the next steps to extract it and then load it in this case, as a lead inside of our Dynamics application. All right, so I'm going to start by just updating this a bit, and I want to say let's open it up in Prompt Builder and extract information from the text template. All right, the problem is that I need some sample data to play with here. How can I get sample data? If you said Copilot, you are right. We are using Copilot throughout this entire demo. I'm going to click on a new chat. Once again, this is context sensitive, so I want to start over. And I want it to be able to generate me an email that a website would send after it captures some common contact data from a web form. So can Copilot help me with that? It sure can. So picture a website where there's no integrations. You go in and you give all your name, address, all that information, and it sends this email into that company internally with this type of information. In my use case, perhaps I'm receiving 20 of these a day, but I'm digging through 1,000 emails to find it. How about this? Let's try to hone this data in just how I want it. So let's add a few more fields that represents a lead and then fill in some sample data. All right. So now it looks like we have this John Doe use case. That's looking better. Can you add a field for annual revenue? I want to see what that looks like so we can convert some numbers. So now we have some revenue in there. Every time I do this, it gives me a John Doe. I don't like that. Let's do something different here. I'm open to suggestions, by the way. But how about, can we change the name and information to represent my favorite Star Wars Lego character? Is it smart enough to know who that is? It is not. Sorry, Luke. It's
Who is
Yoda.
your favorite Star Wars character, Rob?
It's Yoda, of course. Come on now.
Yeah.
That hurts. All right. So Copilot lied to me, but that's all right. I can correct it. How about this? It's Yoda. Nope. Is it going to be smart enough to know that and then change it? There it is. Dear Yoda. Oh, look at that. Nice. So we're generating some good data here. I'm going to take this data and I'm going to paste it back into my sample prompt. All right, so let me go back to that. And just in the sake of time, let's see. There's my text, so I'm going to take a look at my inputs, and I'm going to replace their sample text with my sample. And I'm just going to test it. Let's see what it does just with that basic sample data. So there we go. So it's smart enough to understand that it needs to extract some data. There's some name, email, phone number. I didn't even tell it what to pull, and it's smart enough to know that there's like real data inside of that email. I do want to switch my output to JSON. So that way it is structured data that I can use in a future step inside of Power Automate. So there it is. Look at that. There's my name, Yoda, my email address. It's looking good. I will say that sometimes I'm worried that the data might change or the structure might change. So I want to be a little more specific about what data I want to pull from it. So I'm going to go back to Copilot here. Since it's already generating me some sample data, I also want to understand what that structure looks like. So I'm going to say something like, hey, can you extract all the possible field names separated by commas? And I'm going to send that. And it pulls out all of these different field names that are in that. And I do that because sometimes while my demo email looks pretty structured here, perhaps I might get an email that doesn't have that data in it, or perhaps has too much data, or perhaps it's mixed up a bit. So I want to give Copilot as much instruction as possible. So here under my sample data, I'm going to paste that in. And I want to test that prompt again. And it's probably going to look pretty similar. But I think this kind of protects the AI prompt in case it gets some sort of strange data. I know that I'm going to get a consistent structure here. All right. How's it looking? It's looking pretty good. Since I work pretty exclusively with integrating data into the Power Platform, I do know that some of this data might be a problem. So for example, while I do see annual revenue here, and I do see that it's a type currency, I do know that if I try to pass that value in, it's a string as opposed to an actual number. And I know that might break it. So I'm going to have to either convert it in my flow, or perhaps I can tell Copilot to do it for me. So I'm going to say something like this. Oh. Convert all currency to numbers. There we go. So now I actually have a real number in there. I also noticed that there's a single name here, and I really wanted to have two names here. Does anybody know Yoda's last name?
Nope.
It's Man, Yoda Man. So I want to test that again, because when I do it, I get a full name, but I do know that if I insert data into my Dataverse, I have to separate it into first name and last name because those are two different fields. Once again, I can parse that in my Power Automate flow with some code, or I can just have my prompt do it. So let's try that out. Separate first and last name. Looking good. And then I also know based on experience that I want this whole JSON structure to be as flat as possible. So I'm going to say flatten the hierarchy of entities, listing them at the same level of the output. I'm going to test it again, and that's going to guarantee me that my data set's going to look as true as possible here. So there it is. There's my prompt. And I do know now that anytime I send in this information here, I'm going to get a consistent JSON data set. And now I'm going to take that and I'm going to automate the insertion into my Dynamics application. So let's give that a try. And let's see, it's 4:17. I think we're doing pretty good on time. Instead of building out a flow, I'll show you the one that I've built out already. And then I wanted to actually kind of play with this and see if we can actually give it some mixed up text to see how strong it is, to see how smart it is, to see if it could make sense of just some weird sort of data sets here. So I'm going to jump into Power Automate and show you the flow that I built. So it's pretty straightforward. In this case, my trigger is a new email arriving. That's pretty standard. I have my AI prompt here that I built. So essentially, it looks very similar to the one that we just tested. In this case, it's going to look at my Dataverse, and it's going to add a new row. And I just want to show you here that I've actually had variables here as far as like the last name, company name, description, all of these different things here. I've actually set on purpose because I want to make sure that they're going to the right fields. I picked my leads table. I wanted to make sure that the contact type was prospect, as well as set a lead source and a topic. So I get to control some of these controllables, and everything else is going to come in from Copilot and from my AI prompt. And then after it inserts that, it's also going to go ahead and then send the message to me in Teams, so I know instantly when something is created. All right. So the question is, will it work? a good question. Let's try it out. So on my end, I'm going to create a new email. And let's see what that looks like. And by the way, once again, this is a very simple example. As I'm testing it out, I will say that typically when you have a website sending you information to an email box, it's going to have a very specific subject. So if I wanted to, I can actually have this flow filter based on the subject of an email. So the use case here is that I have way too many emails coming in. If I do know that I'm supposed to receive a specific data set based on a specific subject, or perhaps based on it was sent from somebody, I can add those filters and only run this flow against those emails as opposed to every single email. So let's try it out. Here is my email. How does that look? Pretty good. Let's send it in and let's see what it does. All right, we'll give that just a second here to process. And as it's processing, I'm just curious to know from your perspective, what challenges are you guys running into? What kind of use cases do you have where you feel like using Copilot or AI prompts can actually help automate some of your processes? Type them in the chat, I'm curious to see. So there it is. I can see that my flow is running. It looks like it succeeded. It took about 8 seconds. A couple things happened here. I got a prompt here inside of Teams telling me that a new lead was created. So here's that same window that we just used based on our first use case. So there's all of my Lego information. And then I just got this new link here saying a new lead's been created. I was able to actually get the hyperlink. So if I click on that hyperlink, it'll open up my leads. And if I refresh it, in theory, we should have Yoda. There he is. And it's close. It looks like the first name didn't come across correctly. So we can go ahead and troubleshoot that and see why. Perhaps I have a mapping issue. But I can see everything else got filled in, like my job title, email address, company, all those different things here. So once again, I was able to collect information from a third-party website through an email, and then automatically interpret it, create a data set, import it into my dynamic system as a lead, and all without writing a single line of code. All right. What do you think, Joe?
That was really interesting. I personally, we use Dynamics here as our CRM, so it's super interesting to see what we can leverage from an AI and automation standpoint for lead creation. I think you and I even started talking about a use case for the Behringer website, right? And doing this a very similar process here for automating the lead creation process from the website to the CRM. And I'm sure I'm not the only salesperson or operations person that would look at a similar process like that.
Nice. All right. So I think it's 4:22. Joe, do we have any questions from the audience? If you guys want to put me on the spot, now's the time.
So it looks like we don't have any questions here. I know we had one or two from prior engagements when we were sending out the emails that you got as well. So, do you have any on your end that you got asked but not haven't answered yet?
Yeah, I do see one question coming in. By the way, big thank you to Victor. Johnny5 is alive. Shout out to all of us that were born in the 70s. Appreciate that. I do have one question. Oh, it's the worst question. How does the licensing work? Oh, I don't know. I can tell you what I know. I will say that, first of all, licensing is always changing. Thank you to Microsoft. I do know that there is a Microsoft licensing guide Here's a hack, by the way. If you know how to get to the licensing guide, you can actually load it into Copilot, and then you can start asking Copilot the questions about licensing as opposed to asking me. But I will show you here that if you'd like, I'll go back to my home screen. You can actually play with this 30 days for free. So if you log into Power Automate, you're going to get this banner that pops up here that says, hey, do you want a free 30-day trial? You can see that I'm already 13 days into mine. If you click on yes, then you can play with all of these fun toys for free. In particular, there is a link to AI Builder and how the credit management system works. So that's something that we can send out to the team when we're done here.
Mm-hmm.
I'll actually, if you don't mind, Joe, I'm going to paste it into the chat. I don't know if anyone else can see it, but if that's something that you want to send out after the fact, I'd appreciate it.
Yep.
All right. Any other questions? Any other really cool scenarios that you're interested in seeing if we can solve using AI prompts?
I'm sure it'll come with people as we end the webinar, like everything else happens.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that being said, I mean, that's the end of my demo, Joe.
I appreciate that, Rob. That was really thorough. I enjoyed looking at both of those use cases on how we and the participants here in the webinar can leverage Power Automate and Copilot, in conjunction. I do have one survey question for everyone at the end of this webinar, relative to if they want to hear more information from us about these two topics that you discussed. Vic, yep, you guys are welcome. We're happy to do this stuff, put this stuff on for educational purposes, and be able to have somebody like Rob, our CTO, go through and spend his time, outlining what it is that we're trying to do, and then showing how to do that. I think that was really, really insightful. So I really appreciate that. I want to take time to thank everyone for their time to jump on the webinar as well. We appreciate your attendance, because I know that time is a precious thing at this point these days. I feel like we're all living meeting to meeting. So I appreciate you taking the time to come and join with us and learn a little bit about what we're doing and what we can offer. So with that, I'll end. Like I said, there will be a survey question at the end if you guys want us to reach out with more information about what we discussed today webinar. If not, have a good day, and I look forward to seeing you guys next month. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.